So you have the institution of Pride staff. So this is the part of the process with the candidate where you've recruited them, just like last time. You've done everything we talked about last time. And you pitched the opportunity and you'd sent them some data and you agreed to have another conversation like the next day. How about we talk this time tomorrow? Then we'll go over this and tell me if you want to take a peek. Sounds good. And you have that call. And as you're talking about the conversation, or excuse me, about the opportunity, you can say this. Before we talk further about this opportunity, Joe, I wanted to tell you that our company's been around since X number of years. And one thing that separates us from other recruiting firms is our professionalism. So anything that you tell me is going to be kept in confidence and is only going to be used to help you evaluate this opportunity. So you can set that up. So as you're in that conversation with them, it's going to flow naturally. And you want to insert things like talking about the institution of your company, talking about the career stability that you personally have. And this is a back and forth. And as you have that back and forth with them, it should flow naturally. As you get to know people, how long have you lived in Fresno? Oh, where do you live? It's a give and take. And there's one principle of influence called authority. The fact that you've been with the company for a long period of time, the fact that your company has been around for a long period of time, all of that means that their trust in you and your organization will increase. So here's an exercise. I want you to do this exercise right now. What is unique and distinct about you personally? And this is really important because there are 20 other recruiting firms that are going to be chasing after these people after you talk to them. And you need to have a narrative that's obviously congruent, authentic, but something that serves their interests. And this is really important because every other headhunter is going to be calling them. And we want you to be someone that's so good that they say, gosh, I get calls all the time and nobody's like you. And this is how you do this. What is unique and distinct about you? What can you say about your own personal experiences, your career experiences that can help them feel safe? For example, I think we heard that somebody is a top producer in your whole system. That is something that's worth noting to your candidates. By the way, Joe, I want you to know that in our whole network, I'm the top recruiter. And there's a reason for that, because I only put the candidate's interests and the client's interest ahead of my own. That's believable. That also builds social proof. Wow, you wouldn't have earned that unless other people voted you for that award. That's one example of that. If you can't say that, here's some other ideas. You can talk about previous experiences that you've had in your life. I remember once, years ago, I was doing some training for a firm in their office, and they had probably about a half dozen people, all doing direct hire. And one of their employees, one of their recruiters, was an ex-golfer. He was a professional golfer, which is pretty interesting in itself. And he was talking about how he used to hit the circuit, and it wasn't really like the PGA Tour, it wasn't the mid-level one, it was kind of like the one below that where you're really starting, but he was out there playing golf professionally for money. That's interesting. And I asked him about that. I said, tell me about the character qualities of a high-performing athlete. And he mentioned those, and I said, those fit exactly with what a high-stakes recruiting person would do. I said, when you're talking with candidates, I would recommend using that. One thing that's different about me, Mr. Candidate, is that I used to be a professional athlete. I used to be a professional golfer. Yes, it is a sport. And I function at a high level in everything that I do, and I bring that same level of detail and commitment to you. So what are some past life experiences you've had that can help people feel safe? I used to be active duty in the Navy. So one thing I tell every candidate is, one thing you should know, that I held a top secret security clearance back when I was on active duty. That means I keep all of your information in confidence. People love that. So what is it that you've done in previous careers? Other people I've met, one person used to be a professional marriage counselor. So you can imagine, being a good recruiter, you got to be part marriage counselor anyways. So there's a lot of applicability of that into this industry. Another person I met used to be a teacher. So she would tell candidates that, as you know, I used to be a professional teacher. So I'm going to be very clear with my instructions and I expect you to listen. She was able to use that as a way to bond people to them. So think of your past career experiences. Or the other things, I'm also a professional artist. So I'm not a professional anymore because I hate selling my art because it makes me feel like I got another job. So I usually give it away to people or use it for raising money. But I'll tell my candidates and even my clients that I'm a professional artist, which means I bring creative solutions to this process. And it's different. I think sharp, cool people want to be around interesting people. Another person, a recruiter I met, came from a foreign country, immigrated, that had nothing. When they came here, that's different. That's interesting. That means you've got a story. So what is it about you and your story that's interesting, that can have a lesson to it, that tells people, because of this, you will feel safe? If you can't think of anything, there is one, this is an ASA conference, I did a roundtable on this, talking about distinction. And here's two examples of this. One was a very successful staffing company that got very clear on their core values. And they actually were able to get business because of their commitment to their core values. What's unique about us, Mr. Client and Mr. Candidate, is we have a core value system and we follow it. Boom, boom, boom. That's different, that's distinct. There was another young recruiter I met. She was 22. This was her first career at that same roundtable. And she talked about, people say I have an engaging personality. But what that means is I'm just curious about other people. So and here's the catch. That was different, that was distinct. Core values, your personality, your hobbies, previous career expertise. Everybody has something different. Now, the question is, and I want you to write that down for just a second, what's unique about you? What can you say about yourself that nobody else can say about themselves? And the question that we go from here is, how can that improve people's situation on a personal and an emotional level? Because when we're talking with candidates, there's going to be a lot of emotion with this, a lot of emotion, because we're dealing with their careers. So how is that going to help people feel safe? How does it help people going to know that you have their back, that you have the attention to detail to help them, that they can trust you, like I had with the top secret thing, or your core values? So this is something that it's almost so simple that my fear when talking about this is, just give me rebuttal number 37. That's all I really want to know. Just give me the magic script. And it's so simple, but it's so powerful, because this is something nobody else can say about them. And trust me, you know that there are other people that are standing in line right after you. And you want that candidate to say, no, I talk with Jay Addy. I don't need to talk to anybody else. I've got my person that I'm working with. That's what we really want. This conversation with the candidate. Just like I said, you pitched the job yesterday, you're getting into it now. We want to, this is what we call a qualifying call. We pitched the job yesterday. Some people, they're like, send my information there, I'm sold. Tell me what they say. Other people, well, let me think about that. Well, terrific, let me do this. Let me get your personal email and your cell phone. I'll send you some data points and let's reconnect this time tomorrow. How does that sound? Yeah, sounds good. And the way we talk to people, remember, we're assuming they're going to be interested. We're never like, and you don't want to talk to me again, do you? You don't want to hear more about this? No, I don't think so. No. Let me send you this info. Let me send you some data points. Check it out and let's talk this time tomorrow. How does that sound? Sounds great. There's never any pressure with this. And by the way, I don't think you should ever have the feeling that you're putting pressure on people, because if there's any point of pressure, we want to diffuse it. Our job is to be a pressure valve and not a pressure builder, especially when you're dealing with sharp, sophisticated professionals. The minute you apply pressure, they're either going to push back or they're going to more likely disappear. So we want to relieve the pressure and use verbiage, just like I said last time, use verbiage that's forward moving, but is no risk. And like, are you open to hearing about things? Sure. It's forward moving. It has an affirmative response. So during this next conversation, you talk with them. How are you? Is this a good time to talk? Yes, it is. Terrific. What I want to do now is find out more about some of your goals that you have and talk about how this company I presented can help you reach those. So if you didn't do it on the previous recruiting call, or maybe it was just kind of a snapshot on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you? I'm a 7 or I'm a 6. What's keeping it from being a 10? this is a time to kind of get more into that. So before we talk about this, you mentioned leadership challenges. What does that mean exactly? Like we said before, how so? Why is that? You want to document this within your database when you're documenting your conversation with them. And then in terms of their hopes and dreams, right? What is it that they want to accomplish? You can go into that further and document that as well. And then talk about the opportunity. What do you know about them? Have you heard of them before? Go more into how that opportunity can help them reach their goals. And what's interesting, what's absolutely magical is, and you take the time to know 20 reasons why someone will join that company. And their reason might be just a shorter commute. I just want a shorter commute. That might be enough for them to move. That's what we're talking about. Or maybe there's 2 or 3 things. Those are the things that we're talking about. Avoid the temptation to oversell the opportunity. There might be 10 more reasons why they would want to go there, and they'll see that, but avoid that. You don't want to be too excited. Once we have someone that's ready to go forward, then we stop selling. That's how it works in sales. So we're going to also define an attractive narrative that they have, that we're going to present to our client. And there are a couple of things that we can do. We can talk about, one question I'd recommend is, if I were to present you to a company, but they're on the fence about bringing you in for a meeting, what would be one thing you'd want them to know that would change their mind and have them bring you in? I always like to find out, what is that one thing? Or you can go a little bit deeper. I've read your resume, and what are 3 things you would want a potential employer to know about you, things that might not be on your resume? That's another good thing to kind of get that key selling points that you're going to present to the client. So we're talking with them. We want to also get more detail about their candidacy, such as if this is going to be someone that might relocate, let's say, and when you find someone that says, I hate it here, I want to move, and I'm willing to work with you and only you, it's just absolutely magical. It's what you call a one-call placement. You can actually make a placement with one call. Put a call into an employer, followed up by an email. They agree, they get your fee schedule signed, they interview your person, they pay you the fee. We'll talk about that, and then other ways we can harvest opportunities from that. So that's what we're always looking for. We're always trying to find who's going to be that number one person that I'm going to present to a handful of companies. So keep that in mind. And as we're qualifying people, it used to be you could ask people, tell me about your compensation, not your bonus, but just your base. Nowadays, in many markets, you can't ask about compensation. One thing you can ask, though, tell me about your compensation expectations. If the candidate tells you what they make, that's great, but we just can't ask that. And many times that helps out when they share that. And what are their compensation expectations? So if you were going to move to another company, tell me about your compensation expectations. Other questions we want to ask them: where else have you interviewed or sent your resume? Is there anything that you have pending? Do you have any offers that are outstanding? How long ago have you interviewed? Have you ever talked with ABC company? This is the company you're talking about. Have you ever met with them? Yes, I did. When was that? 2 months ago. You might not claim a fee if you present them if another recruiter did prior to that. Was that through a recruiting firm? So that's something you want to check on as well. In terms of timing, is there anything related to timing that you would need to be mindful of in terms of starting at a new place? When would you be able to start? What are some quantifiable results that you've achieved that you would say are your most defining successes? What are you most proud of is another way to ask that. And then how can you get quantifiable results? So for example, when we're presenting a candidate, we want to say number 1 out of 17, not an amazing sales rep. This candidate is ranked each for the last 3 years, number 1 out of 17 to 20 sales reps. That is a quantifiable result. How much did they generate in terms of revenue? Did they do any consulting internally that saved hundreds of thousands of dollars? What were the quantifiable and measurable results? Because when you present that candidate to an employer, a hiring manager, an executive is looking at that and in their mind, so what? How do I know with certainty that this person's really going to produce? Well, these are the quantifiable results. So that's another reason why we want that. And then we also ask them, so can you see yourself making a move in the next 60 to 90 days? Can you actually see yourself doing that? And sometimes people can't. If you're going to lose out on someone, lose out early rather than later. If we're going to lose out, you know what? As I've been thinking about this conversation, I just don't see myself leaving here. I love my team. I really don't want to waste your time. That's a hint. That's a win that we're not going forward. Now, it's always case by case. Well, is it worth it for you to have a conversation? No harm, no foul. I've done some placements like that. Well, I appreciate what you're saying, Chris. And one suggestion I might make is to look at the time commitment in an initial telephone call with my client. We can set it up simple like that. Instead of a Zoom meeting, instead of a person meeting, we can just do a phone call, 30 minutes. And then at the end of that, ask questions to my client, and then you'll know, does it make sense? And is it worth it for you to go to the next step? How would you feel about structuring it that way? Some people will say, yeah, that makes sense. And that's not a bad thing because they're going to get some insights. Will they go forward? And if this is a really amazing candidate, you're going to look that much better because now you've actually brought somebody to the table that's amazing. And you've got to tell your client, this is someone that may not go forward, but there's a chance. That's why I set it up to just a 30-minute phone call. So you can have to be in sell mode. And what I like about situations like this is that I grow closer to my clients when I have somebody that's a superstar, because now I've got to coach the client on the interview. This is what you need to talk about. So if you have somebody that's just, I just don't know. Well, can I make a suggestion? And that's a phrase that you can use when you talk to people. Can I make a suggestion? Sure. They're giving you a green light. Have a 30-minute conversation with my client. We can even set it up by phone. Things I've done before. I have a deal like this right now, where the candidate was on the fence and I said, there's a reason why you're hesitating. And that's all I said. And he says, yeah, I'm really afraid that word's going to get out that I'm looking. And I told him, I said, what if I presented it just to my primary point of contact, the recruiter, and then also the managing partner and nobody else? And I know this firm, I've met them, I've had drinks with them, I've had meals, I trust them. If I got their agreement to manage it that way, would you feel comfortable with me presenting your info? And he said, sure. And I did, and they confirmed, nobody else sees it. Those are things you can do. See, the goal isn't necessarily getting them to join your client's company. The goal is to get them to the next step. And that next step may be just considering that, maybe there is something better. That's the next step. Victory, yes, he's considering it. He's considering it. The next step after that is have a conversation with my client. And one thing I like to do when I move people forward in that conversation isn't to say, I don't like to say it like this. I used to say it like this. Would you be okay if I presented your resume to my client? And what I like to do now is say, why don't you and my client meet? Or would you be okay having a conversation with my client? Sure. Now, do I know if my client's going to agree to meet with them? Probably, but maybe not all the time. But I like setting it up that way because we've actually gone through a few more steps, and in their mind, they're actually seeing themselves going on a meeting. I don't like to call it interviews with candidates or clients. I like to call it a meeting. Interview, I got to go on another interview. Meeting, I do meetings all the time. So it's another little subtle thing you can tell people when you talk with them. So one other rule of the road. Let's say you're having this conversation with the candidate and now you're kind of winding it down. And you've got agreement that you're going to present the candidate's resume to the client and hopefully they'll go forward on a meeting. You've got that agreement. And now we're talking about next steps. You've got the resume, you understand their career history, and remember other things. I'm not going into too much detail, but of course, look for gaps. Does the resume line up with their LinkedIn profile? When was the last time you updated your LinkedIn profile? I presented a candidate to a client and there was like a 4-year gap. I didn't even see it. Oops. What did he do between here? Oh, well, yeah. Department of Maryland Corrections. No, he wasn't in prison. I'm just joking. I mean, that's my fear. Oh, Department of Maryland. What is that? Corrections. I was in prison. No. I mean, I've heard stories of people, right? And I'm sure you guys have also. But make sure that there's no gaps, that all the detail is there, that all the chronological history makes sense. And then we're going to move forward and we're going to negotiate an agreement of our process. And this is something I use, the principles of influence, I use the tool of reciprocity. And we also talked about that tool on how we get negotiations. We mentioned that before. And all of this, and there's a whole session I do on all that, comes from Dr. Robert Cialdini. Influence at Work is his website. I knew him and his wife about years ago. I actually got him booked to speak at NAPS years and years ago. But there's a reason why people say yes, and you can use that reciprocity. So I'll do this. As we go forward, Joe, if at any time you're not interested in this opportunity, I'm okay with that. This is your career. And the only thing that counts is you doing what's in your best interest. And they're like, finally, a recruiter said it. No other recruiter's like, and the only thing that counts is you join my client opportunity so I get a fee. No, we don't want to say that. Yeah, we want that. Yeah, hey, we're in the business, but we're in a derivative success business. We make money when and only when we create that mutual satisfaction of needs. And that's a phrase I use with candidates. You can too, or even clients. My job is to create a mutual satisfaction of needs between candidates and clients. And that's the only way I can make a good living. So you can tell people things like that. So as we go forward, Joe, it's almost like, hey, as we go forward, here's the highway. And there's going to be an exit ramp up there at about 5 miles and another 10 miles and 15 miles. And anytime you don't want to go down this path, feel free to take the exit ramp. People like that. I mean, again, we're relieving pressure. And you know what? They're going to anyways if they don't want to. But how they're going to do it is by ghosting you and never returning your calls or text messages or emails again. And in today's world, nice people blow you off. Nice people, professionals, good, happy, wholesome, moral people will not call you back because that's just how it is. So this is where we go. As we go forward, if at any time you're not interested in this opportunity, that's okay. Just tell me that. The only thing that counts is you doing what's in your best interest, and that's it. And you can also say this, if there are other options out there, I may be able to bring some other ideas if that's what you're interested in, because we don't want to blow off this particular search, right? We've got a client that we're recruiting for. But I'll tell you this, that your loyalty, especially in contingency recruiting, and here's a little bit of minor heresy brought to you by me today, is that your loyalty is to that placement that's going to close the quickest. It might not be to a certain company. Of course, we want to have loyalty to that company. But if that company is slow to respond, if they don't get back to you, if days have gone by and they're not giving you feedback about your candidates, is that truly a priority for them? Maybe not. What if there's another company you haven't done that much work with, but they're responsive? It doesn't hurt. If you have a deal that's going forward and you think, I'm just getting that spidey sense that my client is not as madly in love with my candidate as my candidate is with them, so I need to find another suitor. Have you ever noticed that recruiting and dating is the same thing? We're matchmakers, really. Maybe there's somebody else that's better looking or has better credit than this person, right? So we have that balance. We have the search we've been engaged by our clients to recruit for. And at some time in that relationship, you might get a sense that maybe the company's not going forward. And you can say, Mr. Candidate, what if there's some other opportunities out there? Would you ever want to look at some of those? And maybe that can turn into an MPC. See, the goal isn't necessarily making placement with one company, it's making a placement, period. Your loyalty is to the placement that's going to close the quickest. And that's why we always believe that people are going to be predictable and consistent. And we want to keep our thumb on the pulse of every deal. And if there's any sign that it's slowing down, we need to either reinfuse momentum or take it to a different direction. Candidates that are very good are very scarce. So this is what the rules of the road are. You can say, this is where we're going. Exit ramp. And then you can say this. This is what you can expect from me. And I'll even set it up this way. I'll say, from this point on, my role is to facilitate the process of you and my client getting to know each other. So it's almost like 10 minutes ago, I was a recruiter. Now I'm a facilitator. So Joe, let me tell you about where we go from here. My role changes to where now I'm that of a facilitator, facilitating the introduction of you and the client. And this is the process. I'm going to present you to them. There's going to be a series of meetings. And if you like them and they like you, there's going to be an offer. And I get involved in all of that. Sometimes, many times, negotiating the offer, and then always helping you learn how to resign so that you can leave a good relationship and a good reference intact. So you set it up. This is where we go. This is my role, and it changes. And then you can talk about expectations. This is what you can expect from me. Two things. Remember what I talked about? There's two doors. Door number one, door number two. 3 doors. Choose your own adventure. I always like to keep it simple. 2s and 3s, because I can remember that. There's 2 things you can expect from me. I'm going to be honest. If there are concerns my client has, I'm going to tell you what those are. And I'm going to be responsive. Anytime you leave a message for me or send me an email, I'm going to get back to you that business day or first thing next business day. So, principles of influence. We're making a deposit in the emotional bank account. And now we're making a withdrawal. It's a quid pro quo. This is what you can expect from me, and this is what I need to expect from you also. 2 things. Honesty. If it isn't for you, that's fine. Don't blow me off. If it's not for you, that's okay. Some candidates, they think they're going to hurt my feelings and I never hear from them again, and I thought I did something wrong. But if it's not the opportunity for you, just let me know. There could be other options, which could be a fit, because I've done business with X number of companies. Honesty. And then responsiveness. The same thing I need to expect from you is responsiveness. Anytime I send you a note, leave a message, send you a text, get back to me that day or first thing next business day. And always, the next thing you say is, that's because. When we say that's because, the odds increase of compliance. That's because there's a window that could close on us, and it's important that you and I keep in close contact as we go forward. And then one thing that you always want to do when you gain agreement with people, whether it's with candidates and clients, and on the client side, there's a whole other thing we do similar to this, is what I call the 2 magic questions. And this is called a tie down. We're tying it down, and we're bringing closure to this concept of agreement, of how we're going to work. It's almost like we're negotiating our agreement. Does that make sense to you, Joe? Yes, it does. Are you okay working that way? Yes, I am. And what you've done, you've increased the odds of compliance. Before, there might have been a 30% chance that they'd ever call you back if they weren't interested. Now there's about a 90% chance they'll stay in contact with you if they're not interested, just because you do it this way. And these are simple techniques, and this is very tactical, that increase the odds significantly. If you could do this, I guess the cool thing about turning 55 this month is that I've seen more heartache, heartbreak, and failure in recruiting than most people. And if I could go back in time, what would I have done differently? That's the benefit of your company investing in somebody old and cranky like me, giving you ideas. So thank them for that. But I'm saving you 20 years. You want to set the expectations with the candidates. This is what you can expect from me. This is what I need to expect from you. And this is why. And then bring it closed, tie it down. Does that make sense to you, Joe? Yes. Are you okay working that way? Yes, sounds simple to me. What do we do next? And so what we're really doing, and write this down, we're establishing ourselves as a leader. We are leading people forward through the placement process. If you think about what sales is, it's really a process of making decisions with which people will agree. So this is what we need to do next, Joe. things like that. I need you to send me a resume and tell me that when you've updated your LinkedIn profile. And then tomorrow, once you check your calendar, tell me 3 or 4 times next week you'd be available for a meeting with my client. We're just setting it up. And one way that you can accelerate the process, remember the goal, listen, I learned this back in 1995 from my mentor, Jim Vockley, who's still in the business, about ready to retire. He says the goal of each step in the process is to go to the next step. It can be, the next step is send me your resume, send me your schedule. If we want to accelerate, we want to shorten the time that it takes to go from each small step to the next. What are some time schedules that work for you for an interview next week? So when you make your submission to your client, based on the criteria of the search you gave us, this candidate, we believe, could be a very good fit. And something in your submissions always states, John Smith has authorized my submission of his candidacy for your review. You always want to state that. And the reason is, there could be some other headhunter out there that sent that person's information to the client the day before you. Maybe the candidate talked to him, didn't give him the agreement to do it, and the recruiter said it, but the fact that yours says he has authorized my submission of his candidacy for your review, that means that you're going to be the one that gets paid the placement fee. I've won deals like that before because I wrote, he's authorized the submission of the candidate. And then you put the information that you talked about with the candidate in terms of pushes and pulls, and then quantifiable results, maybe a bullet point format, 3 things that you might find very interesting about the candidate. Number 1, out of 17 sales reps, his company's largest client asks for him specifically by name to work on all their projects. And he's mentored 3 junior sales reps that are now sales managers and still with the company. Those are very specific. It's not opinion. We want to state facts that we got from the candidate by qualifying them, by taking the time. If there were 3 things you would want this employer to know about you that might not be readily apparent on your resume, what would they be? If they were on the fence about bringing you in for a meeting, what would be 3 things you'd want them to know about you? And then if you can, find a quantifiable result from each of those. Boom, boom, boom. The candidate mentioned he has some professional frustration in his current company because of this. When I described the significance of your opportunity and how he might be able to fulfill that goal, he was very excited about that. So I'd recommend talking about that during your meeting with him. Something close. We're not saying maybe you want to interview him. When you meet with him, this is what I recommend suggesting. And he mentioned that he'd be available next Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday afternoon, anytime in the afternoon next week. And when you do it that way, you get an email back. Tuesday at 3 o'clock. I'm so happy. I go, wee, like that, right? It's fun to get excited when you set these deals up. Yeah, that's exciting. When they get that response right back, we saved. Yes, we'd like to be interested. What's his availability? Well, let me go back and find out. And here it is. No, there it is. You accelerate that. I'll tell you this, small incremental wins in significant areas yield huge dividends over time. It really does. So one final thing I wanted to talk about was getting more referrals from candidates, but let me kind of press pause. Are there any questions or comments on anything that I've covered so far? I'm going to check the chat box, and then if anybody has a question, just go ahead and unmute yourself or comment.
Scott, thanks for all the information. This is great. I'm curious, when you're scaling your team from 1 person on the team to 10 people on the team, is there a checklist that covers all the items you just walked us through to make sure that the next steps with candidates in the process are being followed consistently throughout the team? And how is that managed internally?
There's 2 ways you can do it. That's a good question. You can have structured tools and checklists and protocols that you have them actually follow. In some firms, they'll have not necessarily a checklist, but they're going to go over that. But the other way, I think, is to teach them using visual tools where they learn that. And they now know it to the point that it's less mechanical and more of just their standard operating procedures. What we do, we have a flow chart. It is a graphic tool, similar to the way that people would write code. Like, here's the circle of the beginning process, here's a line to the square, which is the next step, and then we have yes or no, it goes to a diamond. It's a visual tool that describes our process. And that's what I think you really want. My own opinion is you want people to study it like we're doing right now, but to really know it so that they don't need to use any sort of checklist like that. That's my recommendation. That's a good question, thank you. But I'll kind of bring it home here then on referrals and how we approach our candidate management, which is what this really is. And I mean, everything that we're doing, that we're talking about, is going to elevate how they perceive you compared to every other headhunter out there that's not doing it this way. So a couple of final points on referrals. Last time we talked about deposits and withdrawals. Anytime you want to talk about your career, call me. Even when you get a raise or a bonus, I'd be glad to be a resource for you. Wow, thanks. Say, who do you know that fits this profile? Other things you can do, you can say, if you like writing, maybe you could write something for your company. Here's a checklist of career management, or here's a quiz about how to determine if you're in the right spot, or something like that, something you can give them. Resources that you have, articles that you wrote or other people have written within your company. I'm going to send you this resource. If I can help you out at any time, let me know. Wow, thanks. My pleasure. By the way, and only when you've got the right type of rapport, then we can go into that. Here's some other ways, or some other variables to consider in terms of referrals. Game theory. We want to take action at times when the return is most likely to take place. So when is the best time to ask for a referral? It's when your value is the highest. So here's some ways when we talked about how can I get more candidates? What's the lifeblood of selling? It's referrals. When is a candidate most likely to feel some love to you and loyalty to you? When they joined the company, when they turned their notice in and their former employer accepted their resignation and they're going to start on Monday. That might be too soon because you don't want to take away from your contribution to them. But it could be within the next 2 weeks. They're getting integrated. I did this with a guy. How's the integration going? And you want to keep in touch with people after you place them. How's it going? It's great. It's fantastic. And that's also information you can use as you're selling that opportunity to other people. One thing a candidate I just placed there said, he is so impressed with their integration protocols. It's going better than he thought, which is key, as you know, in our business. Now, I also earned the right. Steve, I'd always appreciate some referrals. Who are some friends of yours that you think I should reach out to? And there's 2 ways you can do it. Specific, I'm doing another search. Who are some people that fit this profile? Or who are some friends of yours that you think have their ear to the ground? And if you work in an industry niche, let's say you have a vertical niche you work in, and there might be 3 or 4 positions, maybe operations, engineering, sales within that industry. And so you can keep it general. Who are some people within at your old company that have their ear to the ground? Some friends of yours at your old company that have their ear to the ground that you think would be open to my call. And they might say, you should talk to John Smith. He told me that he's going to be wanting to move in the near future. So you can get some easy referrals that way. Reciprocity. You made a deposit. You have earned the right to make a withdrawal in that relationship. So at the acceptance, many times at the acceptance, how did it go? It went great. Even before they're out of that company. That could be an appropriate time to ask, would you be okay if at some point I asked you for referrals? You could soften it that way. Sure. How about now? Great. It depends on the quality of the relationship that you have with the candidate. That might not be too soon. For other people, it might be too soon. It's case by case. So you can say, would you be comfortable at some point me asking for referrals? Maybe people in your current company where you're leaving, or the company you just left. Sure, that'd be great. And then follow up in 2 weeks because they said yes, and now they're there. So timing is everything. So another time you can ask people for referrals, and this will be my final tip, is after a career win. Let's say the person that you presented got promoted. That is a career win. And who do they have to thank? They have you to thank for it. Boy, it's been great to be a part of your career, and it's nice following you on LinkedIn. And I'm really pleased that I get to be a part of your success. It's a lot better than, okay, you owe me. It's exciting to be a part of your career story and your career success, Steve. And I'm really excited about that. Wow, that's great. Thank you so much. Couldn't have done it without you. Yeah, I'm happy to do it. By the way, who are some friends of yours that have their ear to the ground, people you think I can help? Well, you should talk to John Smith down the hall. What is it about him that impresses you? You can get some intel. What's even better is, can I shoot you a note to your personal email address? Can you email intro us to each other? Which is huge. You can do that with people. So what I would recommend is carve out an hour over the next, each week over the next 2 or 3 weeks, do research, build a list of referring calls, people you're going to call with the intention of asking referrals from. Who are the people that you just placed? Who are the people that you've seen have had good career wins? Even people that, it's been a long time, I wanted to call and see how you are. Yeah, and hopefully it's still working out, right? Hopefully it's still working out for them. And say you could even, I've suggested this, we even have a referral contest right now. I know it's kind of silly, but you're somebody that I respect. And would you be comfortable with me asking for referrals at some point? That's a good soft way to kind of get them used to that. Sure. And if people are reluctant to do that, say, well, even if you don't want me to mention your name, any pointing me in the right direction would always be helpful. Okay, I can do that. Who do you know that fits this profile? It could be either general, who are some friends of yours that you think have their ear to the ground, or specific, who fits this profile? X number of years of experience. And remember, somebody that's probably not looking to make a move and might even seem happy where they are. Those are the people I'm trying to network with as much as possible. Well, I don't know anybody here. I know a guy that left 6 months ago. Would you be okay if I reached out to him? Because a lot of times people move and it's not what they thought, and they're too embarrassed to tell their friends, but they'll be grateful that I called. I could even keep your name out of it if you prefer. And the way you handle it when you call people, you never ever want to violate the confidentiality. You never ever want to. You can say this, somebody who we both know spoke very highly of you and suggested I reach out to you. And are you open to hearing about things? I do recruiting. Well, who was it that referred me to you? You say, I'm not making this up. It's not just a cold call. Actually, you don't want to say that. Oh, well, I didn't think of you being dishonest. Now that you said you're not being dishonest, I think you're dishonest. No, don't say that. Let me rewind. You can say, well, this person at this point doesn't want their name mentioned because of a conflict. But if this goes anywhere, I'm sure they'd be okay with me telling you who they are. So let's just say it's your guardian angel looking out for you. And when I say your guardian angel, people just love that. I mean, I get chills just thinking of, it's my guardian angel. All my problems are solved. Yes. Let's just say it's your guardian angel looking out for you. Somebody's looking out for you out there. And I found that nobody ever questioned that before, because it's just so pure. Everything that we do is in the service of other people. And that's what I love about this business, is that there's no conniving, there's no dishonesty. We're not con artists. We're not selling timeshares to poor old people. We're doing good things for people. And it's something you can hold your head up high in this industry, especially with your company. And anyways, we're about done. Thank you for your time and attention.